What if you could walk into a Disney fairy tale, and instead of meeting the heroes, you were invited into the villain's world? That is exactly what Disney is preparing at Magic Kingdom. Because at D23 2026, Disney finally revealed major new details about its highly anticipated Villain's Land, and one surprise appearance stole the show. Glenn Close returned as Cruella de Vil, and Disney revealed two major attractions that could make this one of the most ambitious additions ever created for Magic Kingdom. And before we get into everything Disney just revealed, make sure you subscribe, because if you love Disney news, theme parks, movies, celebrity stories, and breaking entertainment updates, this is a channel you want to keep coming back to. Now, let's start with the biggest confirmation. Disney has officially confirmed that the land will simply be called Villain's Land. That might sound like a small detail, but it actually tells us something about Disney's intentions. The company wanted the new area to fit naturally alongside names like Fantasyland and Tomorrowland, while still feeling completely different. And believe me, the atmosphere Disney is describing is anything but cheerful. According to Disney, the story begins with a wishing well that has been corrupted by an evil wish. The well has been torn apart. Its magic has poisoned the surrounding forest, and that dark power attracts Disney's most notorious villains. Instead of simply recreating individual movie locations, Disney is creating an entirely new story where these villains have come together to claim the remaining magical power. That is a really important distinction. Disney says the characters are inspired by classic Walt Disney Animation Studios villains, but the overall story of Villain's Land is an original one. In my opinion, that is probably the smartest decision Disney could have made. Imagine if the land were simply a collection of movie sets. Maleficent's castle here, the evil queen's palace there, Cruella's mansion somewhere else. It could easily feel like a museum. Instead, Disney is trying to create a completely new fairy tale where the villains themselves have essentially taken over forest. And the scale is apparently going to be enormous. Disney says the land will be comparable in scale to Star Wars, Galaxy's Edge. That is a massive statement. Galaxy's Edge is designed as an immersive world rather than simply a collection of rides, and Villain's Land appears to be heading in the same direction, with attractions, restaurants, shopping, and elaborate environments all connected by one overarching story. But now we get to the part that really caught my attention. The attractions. Disney previously announced that Villain's Land would contain two major attractions. At D23 2026, we finally learned much more about them. The first is a Maleficent-themed thrill coaster. Guests will be invited into the domain of Maleficent, the mistress of all evil, racing through an enchanted briar surrounding her enormous mountaintop fortress. Disney isn't giving us every technical detail yet, but Imagineering made a particularly interesting promise. The attraction will contain elements the team says it has never attempted before on similar attractions. Now, that phrase immediately gets my attention. Disney has built some extraordinary rides over the years, so saying something is something Imagineers have never attempted before creates enormous expectations. We don't yet know exactly what that technology or ride system will involve, and I think it's important not to turn speculation into fact. But if Disney actually delivers on that promise, this Maleficent coaster could become one of the signature thrill attractions at Walt Disney World. And then there's attraction number 2. This one might actually be even more interesting from a storytelling perspective. Disney is taking guests beneath the land into the evil queen's catacombs, where they'll encounter the famous magic mirror. But the mirror isn't simply going to show you a reflection. It will transport guests into something Disney is calling the Mirror Realm. Inside this mysterious realm, guests will encounter numerous Disney villains brought to life through a combination of physical sets and special effects. And this is where Disney appears to be taking a completely different approach from the Maleficent coaster. The Maleficent attraction sounds like the adrenaline experience. The Mirror Realm sounds like the dark, immersive story experience. One gives you speed. The other gives you atmosphere, characters, and fantasy. And honestly, I think that combination could work extremely well. But then came the surprise that had Disney fans talking. Glenn Close appeared as Cruella de Vil. Yes, Glenn Close, who famously played Cruella in the 1996 live-action 101 Dalmatians, returned to the role during the D23 presentation. And Disney fans immediately understood why this was such a fun moment. Cruella is one of those Disney villains who has become bigger than the original animated movie. And Glenn Close's performance helped establish the live-action version as one of the most recognizable portrayals of the character. According to coverage from the D23 presentation, Close appeared in character as Cruella, who was apparently less than thrilled that she didn't have one of the attractions specifically announced for her. The joke ended with Cruella essentially ordering Imagineers to get to work. Now, here's where we need to separate what Disney confirmed from what fans might want to happen. Disney has not officially announced a dedicated Cruella attraction. So if you're seeing headlines suggesting Glenn Close's appearance confirms that Cruella is getting her own ride, I would be careful with that interpretation. What we know is that Glenn Close reprised Cruella at D23, and the presentation playfully suggested that Cruella wants more. Whether that becomes an actual attraction is something Disney has not confirmed. And personally, I think that uncertainty makes the moment even more interesting. Because if Disney eventually gives Cruella her own experience, this D23 appearance could look like an early tease. But for now, it remains a fun piece of storytelling rather than an official ride announcement. And there's another fascinating part of this entire project. Disney has been developing the visual identity of Villains Land for several years. Imagineers previously traveled to places including Paris and Barcelona, studying architectural styles such as Art Nouveau and Modernism. They used elements like swirling natural patterns, dramatic proportions, and rich visual details to develop what they call Conjured Architecture. The idea is that the buildings themselves should feel as though the villains have magically created them. And that concept could make Villains Land visually spectacular. Think about it. Instead of ordinary theme park buildings decorated with villain logos, imagine architecture that looks physically twisted by magic. Buildings that seem to belong to the personalities of the characters living inside them. That is exactly the kind of detail that can turn a theme park land from something you visit into something you remember. But there's still one major question Disney hasn't answered. When does Villains Land open? As of the latest D23 2026 announcement, Disney has revealed the story, confirmed the official name, and provided substantial details about the two attractions, but an opening date has not been announced. We also still don't have the final attraction names or the complete lineup of dining, shopping, and character experiences. So there is still plenty left for Disney to reveal. And that's probably intentional. Disney first announced Villains Land at D23 in 2024, promising two major attractions alongside dining and shopping. 2 years later, we're finally getting a much clearer picture of what this land is actually going to be. My personal take? Villains Land could become one of the most exciting additions to Magic Kingdom in decades. Not simply because Disney is putting famous villains into a new parkland. It's because Disney seems to understand that villains are more than characters who appear at the end of a movie and get defeated. Maleficent, the evil queen, Cruella, and the other villains have distinctive personalities, aesthetics, and worlds. If Imagineering successfully translates those personalities into architecture, attractions, food, merchandise, and atmosphere, guests could genuinely feel like they've stepped into a Disney story where the villains won. And that's a fascinating reversal of the traditional Magic Kingdom formula. For decades, the park has been built around dreams, princesses, heroes, and happily ever afters. Villains Land asks a very different question. What happens when the villains get their own kingdom? At D23 2026, Disney finally gave us a much clearer answer. There will be a corrupted wishing well, villainous lairs, a Maleficent coaster, an evil queen-inspired mirror realm, and apparently enough room to explore on a scale comparable to Galaxy's Edge. And somewhere in all of this chaos, don't be surprised if Cruella de Vil is still demanding her moment. Because if Glenn Close's surprise appearance taught us anything, it's that the villains may not be finished asking for what they want. And honestly, that's exactly how I think Villains Land should be. Dark, mischievous, unpredictable, and just a little bit dangerous. What do you think? Would you ride Maleficent Coaster, or would you rather enter the Magic Mirror's terrifying mirror realm? And most importantly, do you think Cruella deserves her own attraction? Let me know in the comments, and subscribe for more breaking Disney and entertainment news.